Thank you so much for being here. Today's webinar is Stage Right, which is teaching ethical performance and licensing in theater. This is part of our Copyright Unlocked series. We are thrilled to be joined with by Eric today from Music Theater International. We'll give him a little chance to chat with us a little bit later. I just wanted to share that we were listening to some royalty-free cinematic music from Bensound. So if you are unfamiliar with royalty-free music, definitely check it out because it's perfectly in alignment with everything that we're going to talk about today. My name is Brandon Rader. I am the Music and Theater Arts Consultant at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, and I am only a portion of the arts education team. My colleague, Dr. Laura Stotterman, covers dance and visual art, and Dr. Lori Major Carlin is our section chief, and she was a former theater teacher. As I mentioned earlier, this webinar is part of a larger series. So far, we have already had 2 sessions. We've had our Arrange It Right with Alfred Music Publishing, and we had a panel back at our CAKE conference, the Comprehensive Arts Education, of which Eric actually was a panelist, so we're stoked to have him back. And then coming up, our next one on November 18th is going to be Lesson Launch with Copyright and Creativity. They're an amazing group of media specialists who have lessons already crafted, packaged, ready to go for your students, appropriately leveled, aligned to our standards. So that's a pretty awesome one. We have a couple more webinars in various stages of development, so stay tuned. Check out the PD catalog archive for all of that. Today you will need, whether you are, live with us or whether you are watching this as a recording, you will need a reflection journal. So I'm going to drop that into the chat for our participants live right now. You also can scan that QR code. I believe you can even click on the QR code and it'll take you to a force copy screen that actually allows you to see what it is you're force copying before you do so. And you will need to make sure that that is public sharing, and then submit that when you submit for your CEU credits. Most of the questions in there are in our presentation, so if you're watching the recording, you can kind of just pause and take as much time as you'd like to answer those questions before you move on. So our new CR 2.2 objective through line has what we're calling 6 conceptual bins. This through line really talks about ethics and copyright and the way that we not only model those behaviors for our students, but actually that they acquire knowledge, vocabulary, understanding around the reason we have copyright protections, how they have to play nice with other people's copyrighted works, and how their own creative works are protected under copyright as well. And so those 6 bins that we have are original versus copying other art, because sometimes, especially in the younger or more beginning levels, we do ask students to copy us. Draw a circle just like this. Draw a quarter note just like this. Move your arms just like this. Make your face look just like this. And so we really want to help our students be able to understand the fact that rote and copying, these things have a place, but they are not the same as creation. Then we also touch on what is ethical and legal around sharing. So how much can we share? How can we share? When can we share? What can we share? We talk about that in multiple different grade levels. We also hit on attribution and credit. So when we use somebody else's stuff, which we all know that we, steal and borrow and reference and are inspired by other artists, we need to give them credit. We need to have permission. And so we talk about that in multiple levels as well. And then we know that we need to build our students vocabulary around copyright and ethics. And that really shows up in sixth grade and in beginning because we know that those are common entrance points into our programs. We also take a look at more complex uses like parody, artificial intelligence, remixing, covering songs. And we save that for our honors level. And then we take a look at what um, it actually means to be ethical, and are we using things the way they are supposed to, and we do that in third grade, seventh grade, and intermediate. So you might notice that we are hitting these in multiple different grade levels, grade bands, and the purpose for that is that we know that especially in theater, we might not have a K through 12 theater program. That would be amazing if it were true, but it's not common. However, we're making sure that these concepts sort of spiral and show up in multiple different levels so that our students can build knowledge around all of them. And also so that they can build knowledge in maybe their music class or their visual arts class as they prepare to enter into a high school theater program. So these things aren't completely or foreign to them. If you're interested in learning more about them, we have this one pager called the Conceptual Bins Guide, and you can access it here from the URL or from the QR code. But our question we'd like you to start with is, as you are setting off on this hour-long journey with us, which of these concepts are you most unfamiliar with, or which one do you think that you might need support in being able to model and or teach to your students? So we'll give you just a few seconds to write that in your reflection journal. And if you'd like to share in the chat, you're more than welcome to. All right, today's agenda is as follows. We're going to welcome Music Theater International, and then we're going to talk a little bit about why copyright even matters. We're going to dive into several different scenarios, and then we're going to examine some more resources that you can explore after the conclusion of this webinar, and we will close out with a simple reflection. So as I pass this off, I do want to make the disclaimer that even though we are discussing copyright, which is a legal concept, we are not lawyers, and nothing that we say should be construed as legal advice, but only as guidance toward being able to, again, model and instruct our students around these ideas. So, welcome to Eric. Eric, take it away.
Howdy. Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it sounds
All
great.
right. Good. I'm so thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me. I was so excited to be on the panel a few weeks ago, if that was a few weeks ago, if I can remember correctly, and to be asked back for this. And that, again, I love that North Carolina is teaching these concepts to younger ages and kind of instilling that from an early standpoint. So I think that's great, and hopefully that bleeds into other parts of the country as well, and fosters some good practices going forward. So thanks. Just a little bit about myself. Hi to everybody out there who may not know me. I'm Eric Grapatin. Just a little bit about me, and I'll give you a little brief history of MTI and who we are and what we do. So I'm Eric. I was originally an actor. That's what my training is in. As Brandon said, I am the farthest thing from a lawyer. I'm a musical theater major. I took a lot of ballet and tap. But over the years, I've acquired this information that I'll be able to help with a little bit today. after I was an actor, I kind of transitioned into front of house management in a Broadway theater for a while in New York, and then into the world of licensing after that. And last week, I just celebrated my 8-year anniversary with MTI, which is really crazy and cool and exciting. If you don't know who MTI is exactly, or you have kind of just a general idea, we are MTI is Music Theater International. We're one of the world's largest licensing theatrical agencies that grants theaters from around the world rights to perform some of our great from our great catalog of musicals that are from Broadway, but not just Broadway. Other professionally produced titles are in our catalog as well that never made it to Broadway or were just done regionally that are really cool and exciting as well. We were founded, if you don't know, by Frank Lesser, the famous composer and lyricist, back in 1952. And basically, we exist in order to protect the author's work and ensure that their shows are being presented as they see fit or saw fit, and to be a resource for theaters to put on the best production possible, essentially. I'm personally one of 10 licensing reps in the amateur licensing department at MTI. We all have our own sort of designated regions, if you will. I handle the entire country of Canada, which is no small feat, North Carolina, Illinois, and the Dakotas. And then my colleagues all handle somewhere between 5 to 8 states among them. But because of this, if you ever call MTI or need to reach out to any of us, we're not only designated to our specific regions. I'm not the only one who can answer a question from a North Carolina customer. Anybody can help you out here. So if you ever need help and you can't reach me, please feel free to call the company and ask to speak to any available rep, and they'll patch you through, and anyone can help you out. Just so you're aware of that. Yeah, and basically what I do on a daily basis is I help customers find a show that works for them, help them through the licensing process, start to finish. You get a contract from us when you apply for a license, and it's a bit wordy, and there's a lot of legal jargon in there. So I help field a lot of those questions on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, that's a little bit about what we do. And so to answer Brandon's initial question, getting the ball rolling here is, why is copyright important? And you'll probably hear me say this a few times throughout the day today, but giving credit where it's due is important. And like I said, with why we were brought into existence in the first place, is that we're here to protect the author's work, to make sure that their shows are being presented as they see fit with their original intent. So maintaining that and giving the proper credit to those authors who's we're all grateful for their works to be available to us to do on many levels, both professionally and in amateur licensing, is a great gift, I think, and we want to make sure that their hard work is rewarded.
Awesome. Thank you. And Eric is local. He's in Wake County, which is
I meant
awesome.
to mention that. Yeah, sorry, I moved here into the area, in the Triangle area, about 3.5 years ago. So it's been fun to get to know and meet a lot of my customers. That's something, all of my colleagues up in New York are very jealous of, that they don't always get to put faces to names and meet them in person and actually, talk through what they're going through on a day-to-day basis. So it's been really exciting to meet people and get to know what goes on down here in NC and see all the theater that's produced, which is a lot, which is wonderful.
Awesome. Great. So I think you touched on this, copyright matters because we want to honor what the authors and the lyricists and everybody has created in the first place. And why do you think it's important that we, so throwing a curveball, I don't think we prepped this. Why do you think it's important that we teach our students about copyright? Because you mentioned the fact that like you'd love to see this happen more across the nation.
Yeah, it protects them, one, because Lord knows I didn't learn anything about licensing until way too late, and I went to school for it. Like, you would think I would have learned a little bit more even from school, and when I say school, I mean college. So to learn it at even a younger age, it's instilling those practices to protect them later, and also showing that whatever they do is important, and they would want to be, they would want their own work to be respected as much as we're respecting other authors' works. I I have people all the time say, why can't I just do this? Or, and it's, it's, you're not the author. You didn't take all the time to write Hamilton, right? For 2 decades or whatever it took Lynn to write those things. That's his prerogative for all the hard work he did. So, yeah, I think it's protection. And then just it instills those ethical behaviors going forward, knowing the right from wrong, and even just to question it, even if you're not outwardly doing something wrong, just to say, hey, do I need to look into this? Do I need to find out if I need to take an extra step to make sure I'm covered or someone else is covered? Yeah, that can only, I think, help them going forward for sure.
Awesome. Great answer. I like it. All right. So we want to invite everyone who's here. You can drop into the chat, or you can or write in your reflection journal. The questions we would like you to consider as we move forward are: how do you model respecting copyright in your classroom? And how do you teach your students to respect copyright? And if you are brave enough that you would like to come off mute and just have a conversation with us, that's okay too.
Yeah, I would love to know an example. Just, I honestly, this is so cool and new to me that it's being taught at younger levels. Like, I would love to hear like a real world experience. If anyone wants to share, that would be so cool.
No takers yet. Maybe later. All right.
That's fine.
All right. So, we are going to use our 6 conceptual bins as a framework for our scenarios. And the first one, even though it's a little out of order, we wanted to start with this conceptual bin of vocabulary. So, Eric, can you kind of talk to us about what is under copyright protection and what isn't under protection? We've
Yeah,
got a whole bunch of things here listed on the screen.
yeah, for sure. I'll just kind of go down your list here. Scripts, yes, absolutely. That's a big definite yes. For any theatrical work, you want to make sure you're using the correct script, the legally licensed script. So, and whatever the authors are currently putting out there. Promotional materials and logos. From an MTI perspective, we provide you logos, or we give you the option to have a logo added on to your license, or you can do completely original artwork. So it kind of depends there. But if you're using like original artwork, you want to use like the main famous, I don't know, Frozen logo that everyone recognizes, you definitely want to make sure you're getting the Disney approved version from us, or Disney will come at you, right? So you do have a few options there with logos and whatnot. When we get into things like set design and costume and props, I'll come back to the staging and choreo. Um, I would say in most instances, these elements won't have specific requirements, but there will be sometimes. It all just depends on the show and what's really in your contract. For example, Matilda, I think it still does have, it has like a stipulation that you can't use the swings specifically as part of the set, that the kids swing on and whatnot. But they do have the option to purchase what we call a replica guide, which does give you permission to add certain technical elements from a Broadway or West End production into the show, such as sound, lighting, sometimes choreography and sets, and even costumes. So it kind of depends on a show by show basis there. Um, when it comes to the actors, gestures, and inflection and tone, this we've had interesting conversations on this. Um, my our rule of thumb, I would say, is if it's written in the script, then it should be followed. Essentially, like if it says Sweeney Todd, slices an actor's throat with his right hand, the actor should do that, right? Um, but if it's not specifically written, then the actors have more freedom. I would say that's where they can be creative. When you see it as a written word, that means it really needs to be followed as such. And then obviously things are going to happen. Like an actor may forget his line and not say it exactly right. Obviously, those things occur, and that's the beauty of live theater, right? So no one's going to get dinged for any of that unintentional sort of um, uh, I guess saying the wrong words, if you will. Blocking, staging, and choreography. Um, we offer, and I'll cover this a little bit more later, but choreography videos that you can get original choreography. Um, but do you want to, if you don't have those rights, do you want to find a video of one of the millions of videos on YouTube from all the productions out there and, lift whether it's the original choreographer or I don't know, some local high school production in Wisconsin's or, their original choreography to do your show? I would say not even on the local level. Like we had, I think in Wake County, there was like at least 3 productions at high schools of Legally Blonde. And imagine if one went to see one and then they picked up parts of choreography and inserted into their production. How would that choreographer feel seeing that up on the stage? Not good. So um, you definitely want to get permissions and not just lift. I would say it's just not ethical or it's not creative, if you will, too. So yeah, I think I covered it. And then blocking as it's written in the script and staging. I mean, the director, has freedoms there, but if it's written in the script, it should be followed as best you can, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you talked about both like things that are strictly under copyright, but then things that are just like unethical as well. You're stealing someone else's choreography from across town. That's unethical, even if it's not illegal per se. And Yeah, and even something like you were saying that some shows even allow you to make your own art. So that's great because you can invite your art department, but you don't want to steal a regional theater's or like another high school's artwork or something like that. So that's pretty um, important to teach the unethicalness as well as the breaking copyright stuff as well. Did get some answers to our previous
Ooh.
question in the chat. We have one that says we talk about it when they ask, "Can we just change the lines when we're doing a show?" And so that's one time that copyright comes up. And then another is talking about copyrighted blocking that is different for student because they wanted to do Peter and the Starcatcher and it requires specific staging. So whether or not that was viable is a question. So awesome.
Nice.
So if all of that is protected, what is fair use? Because I do feel like most of the time we're like, it's okay. It's under fair use.
Yeah, for sure. In general, I would just say because theatrical licensing is a commercial venture, rights are going to always be required for public performance. So, and if you're using excerpts from like a play or a musical just for classroom purposes only, and I'm talking no formal audience, then you're able to secure those materials from some reputable retailer and use those materials for those purposes without formal rights. I'd say that's okay. Um, if you're adjudicating like a scene or a song for we have what's called at MTI individual rights applications where you can fill out a form with us and ask to either just have the rights or we can even provide you the material for a scene or a song for adjudication to get those individual song rights for that purpose of adjudication only, and we can provide that for you. But when it comes to strictly using items just for classroom work, I would say that's as long as you have the material and it's not a formal performance, you're okay. Um, Sorry, my notes are a little jumbled here.
It's all good. Yeah. So I know things like critique or using a script for the practicing of annotation or like an exercise in how would you block this, those sorts of things can be used because they're not staging, right?
Right.
Awesome. Cool. So in the chat in your reflection guide, if you can engage with this question, what's the difference between a rehearsal recording for educational review and a public performance online? Oh, wow. That's crazy. This basically falls under what we were just saying, is that when there's no audience there and it's being used for review, and educational, like what can we do better, that's one thing, maybe doesn't need a license, whereas a public performance definitely does. Oh, I love that. We have one is for growth and the other is for entertainment. That's a great answer. I love that.
I threw my sports analogy out yesterday, where it's kind of like reviewing game tape, for the big game, right? Like, if you're looking at rehearsals just to see what they can better for performances, or just see how things are looking on their end, uh, then that's okay to do. If it's for educational purposes. Mm-hmm.
That's that fair use. Awesome. Great. So we're going to dive into originality versus copying somebody else. So here is our scenario here. If we have an advanced theater class performing a musical review, one student director found a Hamilton medley on YouTube and they insist on recreating the original Broadway choreography. It's educational, she argues. We're not making any money. It's just for school. Can she do that?
When it comes to a review or a talent show, something like that, where it's just like there's a performance happening, right? But it's not like a fully licensed production. My first bit of advice is to stay away from video recording anything. And I'm not saying that to get away with doing original choreography. I'm just saying that in general, because that those things can hold you liable. So I would try to stay away from that. Um, but when it comes to like a full length show, like I said previously, we have choreography videos that we can give you the rights to do original choreography for shows that have iconic choreo like Hairspray and Music Man and Annie. And if we don't provide those approved videos for your production, then they should be original choreography. For a review, I would say you should use completely original choreography unless you've been able to secure from somewhere, whether it's the original choreography or their estate or trust or agent, the rights to do so. I would stay away from that if you can. And I think this kind of goes into adapting and like maybe paying homage maybe to the choreographer. So doing something that's similar, but not exactly lifting the choreo. So that, yeah, that's kind of sums it up.
Awesome. Great. What if a drama class writes their own 10-minute play inspired by the themes of Romeo and Juliet, but uses unique dialogue and settings? Is
So
that okay?
for this specific example, because Romeo and Juliet is part of public domain, meaning that the original text can be used freely and adapted and then performed without any copyright restrictions, I would just say you're pretty free, but just make sure what you're adapting hasn't already been done. Romeo and Juliet, and specifically, is one of the most famous and retold and adapted stories over time. And the examples here that you have on the slide, I mean, Anne Juliet was just on Broadway recently, and that's got a very original take to kind of rewriting the ending of the show and where it goes from there, but it's using the main characters. And then West Side Story, again, another famous retelling of that, if you will, adaptation. So just make sure what you're doing is actually original. But when it comes to adapting from something that's public domain like that, you're usually pretty covered, I would say.
Awesome. Great. And so we were chatting a little bit about, how do you encourage students to try to get as creative and avoid copying as much as possible? And one of the things that we said, or that came up in the course of conversation, was, if you ask the internet or even AI to generate ideas for you, it's actually taking what's already out there, and it's kind of distilling it into uh, what might seem like a new idea, but it's actually pulling from other people's ideas. So that might not be the best way to encourage creativity with your students. Really asking them to lean in and flex their creativity muscles, their originality muscles here is great. I know a lot of folks talk about requiring multiple sources of inspiration, being able to see the whole process of how students develop costume designs or set designs, and really encouraging this as a process rather than an end product when we're teaching it in the classroom, to encourage the process of originality and decision and feedback and critique and all of those things. Pressure testing the design cycle, basically. When we can lead our students to engage in that process, then we'll be able to avoid a lot of the ethical or copyright bumpers, and avoid plagiarism. So awesome. So how do you all help your students understand the line between inspiration and imitation? Oh, that's great. I always highlighted why they signed up for the course. It's an opportunity to be creative. That's awesome. Yeah. Give them a lot of examples to look at, but nothing too closely. That's awesome too. It's good. Flood them with lots of creative options. And then what sticks to them is the things that they like the most, and they can adapt. That's great.
Yeah, I always like to say it's, inspiration is like the spark that gives you the idea to create something new, while imitation would be a direct copy of the work or the style. I like the word spark, so I just like to say that a lot.
I like it. Spark. We're gonna have to work that into our next presentation
I
name.
know, right? So great.
All right, we're going to talk about legal and ethical sharing. So this is really when can we share and how much can we share. So our scenario here is, a director buys a set of scripts from MTI and scans them into their Google Classroom so that students can access it and annotate it digitally because it's easier for feedback and it saves on paper. Can they do this?
Well, all that is true. I would do that. It depends on what you've licensed. If MTI has provided you something, most of all of our Disney Junior and Kids titles right now include a digital show kit. So we're giving you the files of the actor books, the scripts, and the piano scores digitally. You can share that basically however you want. You can print it. You can put it in a Google Classroom. That's totally fine. Some of our full length shows have that as well, where they're just digital materials. Only a couple though. There's not too many, so it would mostly apply, I would say, for some of those Disney and Junior and Kids titles. So again, it makes it easier for sharing, like you said, and or if you want to print out hard copies, you can do that as well. If it's a title that is only available physically, then you shouldn't be photocopying it or scanning it into Google Docs or Google Classroom. You should purchase additional physical scripts. So it just really depends on how it's provided. If we've sent it digitally to you, I would say you're good to keep it in that Google Classroom document. If it's only really available physically, you should only get more physical scripts from us if you can.
Awesome. So if it's digital, it can stay digital. If it's hard copy, it needs to stay hard copy.
Yeah.
Sounds great. All right. So what if this teacher acquires a page, a scene, doesn't contact somebody for a license, but it's only being shared under copyright protection and it's being used for critique or for annotation or to take a look at form, something small. It's not going to be placed in front of an audience.
Yeah, I would say the key to remember there is if you're going to put something like that in some sort of a shared platform. It should be somewhere that can't just be easily Googled. Someone can't just Google and look and just happen upon your material there. If you can uh, keep it password protected in some way or in some sort of closed forum, then that would be best for using it for those purposes specifically, I would say. And again, keeping it, if it's, if you have it digital, keeping it digital and not posting it anywhere where it can just be found, happened upon, if you will.
Yeah, that's great. Um, and then, of course, if it's in the public domain, it's totally fine. But otherwise, you really need to consider whether it hits those four fair use criteria. So great. So for everybody in your reflection guide and in the chat, what's the difference between studying or sharing materials simply for study versus a licensed production? How do you know which one's which? How do your students know which one's which? We have to educate them. Lots of teachers need this training. Yep. Awesome. Sounds great. We have to actually be explicit about what it is that we're doing. So nice. All right, we're going to dive into attribution and credit. So, the drama club presents Into the Woods Junior. I was very impressed that there's a junior version of that. But the printed program lists only the student names under choreography, music direction, and design because the director says, everybody knows it's Sondheim. They don't need all that extra info. Is that okay?
Um, yeah, I mean, everyone should know it's Sondheim. That's true. But every license, every contract we have does have specific billing guidelines that have to be abided by. And again, this is about giving credit where it's due. Works that are going to stand the test of time, hopefully, and be out there, and making sure the authors are recognized for all their works. So in an MTI contract, there will always be a billing guidelines or requirements section, and it'll basically give you the whole guide of what you need to include on your programs and posters and displays and other outer boards that you might use. And anything, if it says book by, music and lyrics by, if it says original choreography by, then those all do need to be listed there. So I would definitely refer to your contract. And again, it's just ethical to do that, and making sure you're giving credit where it's due. A little pro tip I would say is that me on a daily basis, I about 90% of the answers I give are things that are just in the contract that everyone has available to them, which the contract is super wordy, which I totally understand, and sometimes hard to navigate, if you will. So I would definitely, if you haven't in a while, kind of give a thorough look through of the contract fully. I had a customer the other day who said, I've been licensing for 20 years and I just saw this little thing on the contract and I didn't know I could be doing this the whole time. And that's always the way it's been. So definitely, if you haven't in a while, give a good look over your contract, because there may be some things in there that you didn't know you could do, or that may give some more clarity to some of these points, especially when it comes to giving credit and advertising. I think we have a little time. Can I share my little story from college days, Brandon? Do you think we have time?
Absolutely. Go for
Cool.
it.
I guess post college days, if you will. So when I was in New York, I was doing a cabaret with some coworkers. We were kind of doing this original review, and my best friend's girlfriend at the time was a composer. And I asked her, "Can I do one of your songs at this review?" She said, absolutely. She gave me the song digitally. She just gave me the permission right there and then. She gave me the materials in my key, which I didn't even ask for. She just did that, which was so above and beyond what she had to do. So I performed it. He was able to come, my best friend, to the show. She was not. And then afterwards, he was like, hey, it was great, but you didn't mention my girlfriend's name in the little program. And just, again, it was like way over my head. I was so embarrassed. I couldn't even imagine. And I was like, yeah, this was not just something that was hopefully going to be seen by some people in the industry for the actors. Like, her work was on display as well. So that was a moment for her to be shown, and I completely biffed it, and I didn't credit her properly, and to this day I regret it, and even more so because she's actually a Tony Award winning composer now. So that would have been a really cool story for me if I had that program. So giving credit where it's due is helpful to everyone in the end, the author and you, and it's kind of a win-win. But that's my little.
Yeah.
I didn't do so good back then, prior to my MTI days.
I think that highlights also another important thing that we've been trying to say to everyone across the state, which is that this is a growth opportunity for all of us. I mentioned in the last webinar that like I've learned a lot in the last year about this, and I didn't do so hot in my teaching years either. In fact, some of the things that I thought I was following the guidelines turned out that I wasn't following the guidelines, and I was really surprised to hear that. But you know, it's sometimes it can be clear as mud. However, Lori pointed out the fact that she loves the fact that MTI was specific not only about what to put in the program, but about the size of those names and fonts as well. So, yeah, kudos on
Nice.
your
I'll pass that up
clarity.
the line. I'm glad it does help too, because if you just kind of blend everything together, it's really hard to get certain names to stand out or to bill things properly. So I'm glad that that was noticed. That's great.
Awesome. All right, so I think we've touched on this a couple times, but this scenario is that a student quotes dialogue from the play Fences in a critique with correct citation, modeling MLA format for script excerpts. Is there anything that people who are quoting dialogue need to consider with the licensing agency?
I would say from our standpoint, when it comes to writing, whether it's a critique or a paper of some sort, you don't need to really reach out to us for anything like that. I said, wherever you get the material from, I would just say make sure you're citing the original material and, the proper formatting based on the material you have from wherever you obtained it. But you do not need to contact us for anything like that, I would say. Again, I am, as much as I'm not a lawyer, I also wrote about 3 papers in college in the middle of all my ballet and tap classes. So I maybe not be the best resource for papers, but in general, I would say just make sure you're formatting it properly.
Yeah, that sounds right. APA, MLA, whatever you're using,
Mhm.
use that formatting, and you'll be covered. Awesome. Great. So, how can giving full credit, our practice of giving full credit, reinforce ethical habits for students? I think that one's pretty straightforward. If our students see us doing it, then they'll know it's the right thing to do, and they'll be able to participate in that habit as well. Great. So we're going to dive into more complex uses. Ooh, yes. And we're even going to talk about AI here, but the comment that just came through that said, in a time of AI use and misuse, our students need to see examples of correct and ethical behaviors. And we got a yes from it. So that's right. Giving credit where credit is due. It's important. All right. So, this one, I know my daughter would be over the moon to actually see this one. For a spring showcase, the students at a school propose combining both The Wizard of Oz and Wicked into some parody that they come up with, called Oz Reimagined. And they write new dialogue and they have new lyrics, but they keep those original melodies. Are they good? Because I know, Weird Al does all sorts of parodies and gets away with stuff.
Yeah, Weird Al, he's the exception, right? When it comes to parody, I would say the standard, the golden rule, if you will. Um, in general, I would say with parody, it's a little tricky. So for a song to be a true parody, the it has to be completely original music and lyrics, and it can have a similar sound, like a similar style to an existing song, but it can't be a full like it can't just be a full copy of the song where you're singing on top of it with different lyrics. um if the character ideas of the song that they're parodying can be original. I was so, for example, I mentioned yesterday that I saw there was Broadway does this Easter bonnet performance every year where they do some performances and they raise a lot of money for things. And one of the casts, I can't remember which one, was doing a song from the box office perspective, and they were singing it to like a Wicked medley, but it was like a parody. And while the music was similar to the Stephen Schwartz style, it was not an exact copy. You could tell things were changed just enough, and then obviously the lyrics were kind of their own thing, and it had some of the classic, the wicked, like some of that. It had those elements, but they were all just changed enough. So if you're really attuned to the music, you can hear that and appreciate it. But for it to really be an original parody, it's got to be original music and lyrics, which is hard to do, I would say, especially for students, to really come up with their own music. If you're using a soundtrack of something and you're singing over it for like a little talent show or a classroom goof around, I don't think that's the end of the world, to be honest. But again, I wouldn't video record it and make it go viral by any sense of the imagination. But yeah, in general, that's my parody thought, I would say.
Awesome. Yeah. Now we're not going to get in trouble for you singing that little part, right?
Is this being recorded? No, I hope not. Don't forward it to the police.
There we go. No problem. All right. It was a very small portion, so
I
it's
don't think
not
I was
gonna.
in any sort of key that could be distinguished as being correct or copyrighted, so I think that's fine.
I love it. Great. Awesome. So, what if, so we know that our ELA teachers, our ELA classes deal a lot in scripts as well. So, let's say they read a short story and they write a stage adaptation and they label it as adapted from, um, and then they perform it for their classmates. Any problem?
If it's just for classroom purposes, I think that's great, and I don't think there's a problem with that. Again, I wouldn't record it. Should be fine. It shouldn't have a formal audience unless it's an original work or it's in the public domain. But if it's a true adaptation for classroom purposes, I think that's just an educational tool, and I think it's a great exercise, and they're more than welcome to do that. I don't think you're running into any legal trouble there, really.
Awesome. What if we decide to stage it like partner ELA class, drama class, and they actually like stage whatever it is?
Yeah, I guess it would depend on the specifics of the title and how much they've adapted it. If it's again, if my rule of thumb is if you're questioning it, you should ask. So I would maybe find out who has that story if it's not in the public domain, or you know what the trust or agency is that has the rights to the original story, and maybe ask. I would rather err on the side of caution and ask if you're actually going to do it for a performance for an actual audience than not. If it seems very like out there, like you're doing a very weird version of Les Mis in the futuristic, Mars universe, and someone stole their ray gun instead of their loaf of bread. I don't know. Maybe you can get away with something like that. It
I
just
think
kind of
you have
depends.
a workable idea here, Eric.
I say that because we actually I've seen that request come through before, so that wasn't just off the top of my dome.
That's awesome. That's great. No, I was thinking more of like, if a class is looking at Hans Christian Andersen's original story of
Hmm.
The Little Mermaid, they just really need to be careful that their mermaid doesn't like have red hair and a purple swimsuit bikini top and a guppy, a yellow and blue guppy as their like companion, right? Because they need to stick closer to the source material than being inspired by something else or
Absolutely,
parodying.
absolutely.
Awesome. Great. Cool. Um, so in this discussion, what if we wanted to change something? So we got the license and we want to change it. I know Medina mentioned earlier, like the students say, why can't we just change this? So, are there exceptions? Like, What if there's explicit language or explicit content that we feel like doesn't fit well with our community?
Yeah, for sure. And it really does vary by community. Like one show that's perfect for one community is like could never be seen ever on a stage in another. So it really varies. So I totally get it. We offer perusals of our shows that are the sole purpose is for you to review the content before you commit to a license to make sure it works for you. And if there's a few things off or you want to ask like, oh, there's a few too many things I might need to change for this, you can ask me, do you have pre-approved edits, we call them, for the show? And a lot of the shows we do, like Mean Girls, now we've just released the official full version of Mean Girls with the option to add in the high school edits that we had previously licensed. So you can really kind of choose what you want to do and how you want to bill it with that, which is really cool. And then some shows, they don't. We have authors that say, if they can't do it exactly as it's written, I would rather them choose another show because they feel, and that's their prerogative, and they feel like it changes too much of what they're trying to get across. Mel Brooks is one of them. If you're changing too much of Mel Brooks' work, how much is it Mel Brooks' work? So he's an extreme example, but it really just depends on the title. So if it's something we think might be open to hearing a positive response on from the authors or their estate, we would basically have you send us a list of the lines or lyrics you want to change. It's got to be a comprehensive list, what you want to change them to, or if you want to cut it, and the reason why, because the authors like to see your reasoning for it so they can learn from it. And if they get enough of those requests over time, they may actually want to change it in the licensable material as well. So it depends on the title. I would always ask if there's pre-approved edits for a show after you review the perusal, and then go from there. And I can help you walk through the process if you need to make a formal edit request with us. Um,
That's great.
yeah.
Um, some of us don't have loads of ballet and tap experience. So what if we don't, community theater, even middle school, high school theater, what if we don't have the dance ability to pull off a ballet scene in Oklahoma or, even smaller sorts of choreography?
Yeah. That comes up a lot, specifically from a choreography standpoint, or when there's just like 18 pages of just music, right? And it's like, how do we fill that space if we either don't have the time or not so much the time, but if like the ability to choreograph or do whatever is requested in that scene. Usually, if it's a choreography specific cut you're wanting to do for that long dance break, if you will, we will usually approve it if it's a linear cut. So if you're cutting, measure 17 to measure 110 because it's too much, that's usually okay. If you want to lift out, this chunk and this chunk and this chunk, that's probably not going to be approved because then it just changes the whole, author's work on their sound and what they want to do with it and how it flows essentially. But if you're just lifting a big dance breakout, I would say if it's just music and there's no lyrics in there, then you're probably okay.
Awesome. What if we need to make any other musical adjustments like range or instrumentation or voice part or something like that?
Yeah, most of our shows we have the ability to transpose. Now, not all, but most we have the ability to offer transpositions for sheet music. If you have the music tracks from us with the MTI player, you can submit a request to update any changes with really anything with them, not just key, but you can remove stuff with them as well. The junior and kids titles are a little bit more stuck in. You can't really change those because they're hard coded into what we give you, and they've already been programmed to be more so for like changing voices as best they
Yeah.
can. So there can't be much done with that. But for full length shows, we have the transpositions, and you can do that. And I have a lot of questions that people ask: Can I add, like for Mamma Mia is a very heavy keyboard. There's like 4 or 5 keyboards in that orchestra. Can I add a trumpet or this, or can I do this on my own even? Unfortunately not. The authors specifically want a very heavy keyboard sound for that production. And, they've asked us not to add any other instrumentation. So adding other, orchestration parts in there that aren't already listed would usually be a no.
Awesome. That's good to know. But it sounds like most of these things are like email Eric and he'll work with you.
It's always worth it to ask the question. If you just even don't think a question is too dumb, you just shoot it my way and I'll see what I can do for you. If it might be a quick, easy answer, but if I think there's any possibility of getting it changed for you, I'll take it up the ladder and see if we can get it done for you.
Awesome. Great. So in your reflection journal, we have the question, where's the boundary between creative adaptation and copyright infringement? So trying to think about how to teach kids when it's okay to modify and make things flexible and when it's too much. I think what I learned was email Eric and ask him.
When in doubt, ask the question, I'd say.
I love it. But I'm thinking, even if students have questions that are unanswerable by a teacher, they can just, through them pass along the question to you so that you can answer the kid's question. So
Absolutely.
that's
We get a lot of calls from students, and which is I would never have
do
the
you
nerve
really?
to, I would never have had the nerve to call MTI as a young 16-year-old in my high school, but we get it. But it's just because they're passionate and they're curious and they want to know the answers a lot of the time, and they just want to try to go right up the ladder. And MTI said, they want to have that moment too, which is cool. But yeah, obviously it should be streamlined through whoever your main contact is at the school. But we do get that. Uh, yeah, and I would definitely say like who's your audience, and is the work in public domain too, right? Um, those are kind of my big things. But yeah, if you ever have the question, I always say it's just worth it to ask.
That's awesome. I love that students are reaching out. That's
I
phenomenal.
know it's wild. I love it.
That means these teachers are having these conversations. So that's
Yeah,
that's
it
great.
is. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Um,
Um, we have a comment. A lot of programs may trust student leadership in developing work, and they likely need this education. Yeah,
That's
that's
great.
perfect.
And you
Yeah.
can add student, if you really trust your student, add them to the account. I would say we do this more with colleges, but for colleges in particular, there should be a faculty advisor as the primary contact, but then you can add secondary contacts on your account if you want them to learn what the licensing process is so they can do that. But then you have someone, I don't see that as much as high schools, and I would maybe steer against that because you don't want them looking into the whole history of the account and whatnot. But with colleges, that's a great place to start that. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great. Awesome. We're going to dive into our last one here, which is ethical use. I know I get questions. I get stopped in the hallways and asked these two questions all the time. So instead of answering them, I'm just going to pitch them on to you. So let's say that a teacher records a full dress rehearsal or even maybe opening night of Beauty and the Beast Junior for the students' portfolios and posts the video to the school's YouTube channel marked unlisted. I'm assuming so that they can, have it for their portfolio or so that they can look and see what they did right, how they could be better. Are we good?
You can video record a rehearsal or dress rehearsal for educational purposes, like we talked about in that earlier scenario, to help the actors see their performances and learn from it. Now, if it's unlisted on YouTube, does that mean you have to know a certain way to get to it to be able to view it? Am I understanding that correctly to your
Yeah,
knowledge?
it's kind of like that
You
that
can't
setting
search
in
it.
Google Docs where like only people you give the link to can actually
Right.
access it. Yeah.
So again, like that's similar to me as being like password protected almost. Like if it's something where
Mhm.
you can't just come across it, that's okay. But if it is, I don't know if you then are just Googling Beauty and the Beast Junior, if it's just going to pop up. So if not, I would say it's okay. So then, yeah, I think that's okay. Again, if it's something that only certain people can access, and I would also add, it should expire at some point. It shouldn't live on YouTube for the end of time, because there's no reason for it to do so unless you're then looking to really hold on to that memory. And in which case you should get the video license and do an archival copy formally and not just from the dress rehearsal. But also, I should mention that for advertising purposes, MTI has what we call the 90-second rule. So when you're advertising a show, you just want to make sure you're doing from your cast recording, whether it's rehearsals or whatnot, no more than 90 seconds of total content from a show. This can be for a radio ad or your public, local public access channel or something. No more than 90 seconds total content from the show, whether that's script or score, and no more than 30 seconds of an individual scene or song per ad. So you could splice like 30 seconds of 3 songs together to create your ad. But it should be from your cast and not the Broadway recording. It should be some of your original rehearsal work, I would say.
Awesome. And our last scenario, while cleaning out the storage room, students find old MTI binders and scores from a show performed 5 years ago. They want to reuse them for this year's cast to save on money, save on scripts. Is that okay?
Uh, and it's not, I get the aspect of wanting to save the money. I totally get that. And it's only because, especially in the last, I would say 5 to 10 years, but in general, content updates so frequently. The authors are constantly reviewing their work. The times change or something is going on in the world and they're hearing a lot of feedback about a certain line or lyric or how something's coming off. And we may completely change certain songs. Recently, Alice in Wonderland Jr. went back into the Disney Vault for a long time, and we've only just re-released it because they were reviewing content and taking certain things out and adjusting based on feedback they've heard and just changing with the time. So the only way we can be certain that you're doing the correct version as of October 28th, 2025 is by sending you the actual materials as we're printing them now and not, Lord knows what else is out there on the internet. There's so many versions of so many shows. The only way we know that you're doing the right one is by getting the materials from us. If you want to use those materials for classroom use, again, no public audience, just something informal, just to work on a scene or something, I would say that's okay. That's all right.
Awesome. Great. Wow, we are verbose. We have hit our hour, so we'll kind of skim through the rest of this. In your reflection journal, you can respond to this one. What questions could you model for students before deciding to reuse old materials? So, just talking about, how do we get permission? I know this is your licensing portal here. They just like go through the steps, right?
Yeah, it's pretty step by step. Once you have an account set up with us, if your school's brand new or you maybe hasn't licensed with us before, obviously you'll want to establish your school's account with us. Once you have access to that, you go into apply for a license under the applications tab. Again, I walk you step by step through, what's your venue? What are your dates? What are your ticket prices? Once you enter all of that stuff in and submit the application, it goes into processing essentially. So if it's a junior or kids show, you're basically almost always guaranteed to get an immediate contract back to you. Frozen may take a little longer just because Disney likes to put extra eyes on that one for whatever reason. But if it's a full length show, we're always reviewing against potential professional restrictions in your area. So if there's a tour or a pro group licensed within a 100-mile radius of you, it'll automatically flag in the system and they'll just have to review it to see if there's any conflict or if they can allow the license with certain additional conditions in there. So it may take a little longer. It kind of depends, but once it's in, you hopefully get approved and then you get a contract from us and then you complete and sign it, send it back to us with payment, and we'll get it going for you.
Awesome. That's great. So we've got a few more resources here. If you're just looking to learn more about copyright overall, the Dramatists Guild and Theater Folk has some great examples. The National Council for Teachers of English also have a resolution on how to use copywritten materials, especially for plays and such. And then we have more licensing resources here because, as Eric mentioned, MTI is not the only licensing house. Concord, who also owns Rogers and Hammerstein now, and Sam French also have resources and licensure portals as well. So as we close out in your reflection journal, there is just a sort of a rose thorn bud reflection here. We've got 3 questions. What's something that really blossomed for you today? What's still feeling tricky and unclear, because you should feel free to just email Eric that question later. And then what is a new idea, strategy, or classroom conversation that you're excited to nurture after today? And we really appreciate having Eric here. We really appreciate having everybody here that's attending and who watches this recording online. And if you have any further questions about this topic, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And we will make sure that teachers and students are equipped to tackle these new through line objectives about ethics and copyright with expertise. So thank you so much for Eric, and everybody have a great evening.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Bye.